Hello, 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 hello. Ah, there are so many metabolic myths that are just all over the internet, all over summits, and all over social media these days. And it really it drives me crazy. It kind of makes my blood boil. So I'm here to crush some common misconceptions with evidence-based insights, things that are based on science, these things that are based on clinical evidence. I don't want you to be fooled by all the misinformation that's usually, not always, intended to make things sound easy. So you'll either buy the program or you'll buy some sort of a supplement, powder, potion, etc., because you think it's going to be all I have to do is take this magic supplement or do this magic exercise or do this specific one thing, and all my woes are going to be solved. My weight's going to drop away and the energy is going to go up and the brain fog is going to lift. But the truth of the matter is, that's not true. Those are myths. And what I want to do today is share with you some of the ones I hear a lot and some of the ones that people bring me, like who are in my programs and I'm coaching with, and they ask me, is this true? Right? Is this true? So let me share with you my take on that, because I want to crush those common misconceptions. So I want to slay the myths and leave you with actionable truths that you can actually move forward and take steps in terms of correcting your own metabolic health. So this is Dr. Rita Marie, and I'm on a mission to transform the way that our medical system is practicing these days, the way that people are getting hooked over and run over the coals with symptom relief without ever actually getting to the root cause, without actually getting support that helps them to be truly healthy instead of just bull. So I'm here to support health practitioners and people alike. So health practitioners, stay tuned, because I'm going to share with you some things that you can share with your clients and your patients. And if you're suffering from the excess weight, the brain fog, the low energy, and a whole bunch of other stuff, and fear about cancer and fear about diabetes and heart disease, you're in the right place. So let's jump in and get started. So first of all, let's start with what is metabolic health. So metabolic health is actually the state of the processes in the body that take food from the outside and convert it into energy on the inside. And there's a lot that goes into that, and I'm not going to get into all of that tonight. I've done whole 2-day workshops and 3-day workshops for practitioners on this very thing and all the things you need to look at if your metabolic health is out of balance. The symptoms of imbalance in your metabolic health are things like brain fog, things like low energy, things like the weight just goes up and up. The risks are diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, stroke, and even cancer. So when your metabolic health is out of balance, you can't really be healthy in all the ways that we think about being healthy. So 92% of the population is estimated to be metabolically unwell. And that was the study from last year, May of last year. Now, it might be higher by now. Maybe it's lower because people are getting the message. But I have a feeling it's either the same or higher because not enough people are getting the message. But I want you to get the message. I want you to be able to take charge of your metabolic health. And yeah, all over YouTube, there's great videos with good actionable information. But there's also some bad ones. All over social media, some people are getting out there and telling it like it is. And some people are just telling you what you want to hear. And what you want to hear is not necessarily what's going to help you to get better. So things that are involved in metabolic health are blood sugar balance, mitochondrial function, thyroid function, and a whole lot more. Your breathing, even to breathe in the oxygen, get it into the bloodstream, carry that oxygen into the system, into the mitochondria, and then, of course, digestive issues. So we have to be looking at the entire system. And when we look at some of these myths, as we'll get to in a bit, some of these just solve one problem, and they actually put the rest of the system at risk. And I'm going to share with you how that is and why that is in just a minute. So why is so much of the population metabolically unwell? Well, some of the causes are poor diet. a lot of refined foods, processed foods, oxidized fats. Another issue is stress. We're in a situation in this world where everybody and their brother is stressed to the max. And the media is feeding into that and trying to get us stressed to the max. And that makes our metabolic health plummet down, right? Also, people are eating on the run. So even if they're eating good food, they may be eating on the run, which means that the digestive process is not working real well and we're not extracting the nutrients. And, you know, lack of exercise, lack of movement, being couch potatoes, sitting in the chairs. I keep hearing this over and over again. People say sitting is the new smoking, right? In terms of the dangers that it has for the body. And we're not saying you should go out and start running marathons and triathlons and doing all those things, but getting movement, consistent movement. I stand at my desk the majority of the day, not the whole day. I was just watching a video by Dr. Joel Kahn, and he was like, he has a treadmill under his desk. He has the stand-up desk, and he's moving on that treadmill. I personally have tried that, and it doesn't work very well for me because it gets me a little discombobulated when I'm trying to read the screen and look at people's labs, but more power to him for that. But I go up and down the stairs quite a number of times. I walk around, right? Sometimes I do squats at my desk. But we have to keep the body moving or the metabolic health is going to fall apart. So given that's what metabolic health is, I've chosen 3 of the top myths that I think are dangerous. There's others, and I explore more of these myths in my upcoming webinar series. Actually, my webinar series already started, but I explore it in there because there's a lot of misconceptions and there's a lot of bad information that people are given. Now, I want to believe that the bad information is because people are just not educated enough, not because they're just trying to fool you or pull the wool over your eyes. So I'm not saying that anybody's bad for saying these things, but I also want you to consider that there's no one size fits all. So when I say some of these things, some of these might work for some people, but they're certainly not the whole picture and they're not going to work for everybody. So one of the myths that gets propagated a lot by somebody who's very popular on Instagram is that, oh, you can eat donuts and cookies and ice cream, all that stuff, as long as you eat it at the end of the meal and you eat vegetables at the beginning of the meal. Well, that might help some people to maintain their weight, and that might help to keep as big a glucose spike, but unless you're measuring, you don't know. But the truth of the matter is, if you continue to eat cakes and candies and pies, even if you don't gain weight from it, it's causing damage to your system because of all those ingredients that mess with your mechanism, right? That the body does not run on junk food. The body runs good food. Now, which combination of good food is the best for you, that's another story. And again, there's no one size fits all. But the commonality is people should be eating whole foods. If you're going to eat dessert, it should be whole food dessert. It could be some fruit. It could be a keto dessert without the sugar, but without the flour. A lot of those keto desserts are loaded with eggs and not really white flour, but things like almond flour, which have been heated. And let me just tell you a little secret that the keto bread makers and the keto dessert makers aren't telling you. When you take up an omega-3 or 6 fat and you heat it up above about 118 degrees, you create oxidation. You create byproducts. You create free radicals that then scavenge around and damage your body. So even if you're making your cookies and cakes and pies with almond flour, it's not such a good idea. You can do it with coconut flour to an extent. Coconut has a much higher level before it gets damaged, somewhere in the 200s. But you shouldn't be baking with almond flour. You shouldn't be baking with walnut flour or flaxseed meal or any of those things because they're going to damage your system and that's going to affect your metabolic health. It's going to lead to insulin. So going back to just eat your sugary treats at the end of the meal, it might be an improvement, especially if you eat vegetables at the beginning. But if that was true, we wouldn't have the crisis we have right now. Because think about it. You go to a restaurant, they give you your salad, they give you your main meal, and they give you your dessert. That's perfectly aligned with this guideline for metabolic health. But most people that eat in the restaurants are not metabolically healthy. We can't say this. And I yes, it's a good idea to eat vegetables first. No question about it. We should all be eating vegetables first, and we should be eating vegetables as a most part of the meal, the main part of the meal, unless you have specific digestive impairments, unless you're specifically sensitive to certain types of components. But we need to stop with these broad generalizations that's causing people to just, I've got a good metabolic health because I'm not getting the sugar spikes. And unless you're measuring, you don't know. If you've got a CGM or you have a glucose meter and you measure to see what the meals do to you, that helps you to determine what the foods are that you can and can't eat. And I'll get to that in a moment. What about the one about just drink a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar with your meal? Doesn't matter what you eat with the meal. You can eat bread and cakes and pies and pasta as long as you have your vegetables at the beginning, you have those foods at the end, and just take a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. And, it's like a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. A spoonful of apple cider vinegar makes the sugar get absorbed better. And no doubt about it is true that apple cider vinegar can help us maintain proper blood glucose. There's no doubt about that. There's good scientific evidence. But it's careless to tell somebody, just eat whatever you want. Just eat your sweets at the end of the meal and take a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar with it. It's dangerous. It's outright dangerous. It doesn't work for everybody. It may work for some folks. And some of why things work for one person and not another has to do with their genetics and how they handle their sugars, how their metabolic health is handled, how their insulin is produced, how their receptors on their cells are functioning based on previous exposures. But we can't give this. We can't just expect that you can continue to eat your cookies, cakes, pies, and ice cream and then be healthy. I see this a lot on Facebook ads. There's these people in there and and then you see all the good foods and don't have to give up your favorite foods. In my opinion, you do have to give up your favorite processed, high sugar, junky foods. You do. But you don't have to give up the flavors that you enjoy because there's great ways to make those foods using whole food ingredients, right? There's ways to do it. And I'm not talking about the keto cookbook with, 15 eggs in every recipe and dairy and almond flour. I'm talking real whole foods with vegetables in it. I can make bagels and I can make breads and I can do it with veggies and seeds like, chia seeds and flax seeds and nuts like Brazil nuts loaded with selenium or walnuts loaded with omega-3s. You can do this. You just need the right tools. You need somebody to help you and train you and teach you how to do it. And that's what I do with people. I help people to continue to eat their good foods. I had a dessert with my lunch this afternoon. My lunch was gazpacho and a green smoothie and some guacamole. And then I had a dessert because I had a hankering for it because I saw somebody eating it. I took some macadamia nuts and I took some coconut and chocolate and I just blended it up and I dipped the macadamia nuts in there. The macadamia nuts were in the freezer, so I let them sit and it froze on like a chocolate coating. I didn't even have to put stevia or monk fruit on there because the coconut was so sweet. But you might put stevia or monk fruit on there and you're still getting that flavor, but you're getting a healthy food, right? Monounsaturated fats in those yummy macadamia nuts, right? You're getting really good stuff. So that's the two. My third one that really drives me crazy is eating fat causes insulin resistance. Sugar doesn't. You can eat all the sugar you want, but fat is what causes insulin resistance. That's a distortion of the research. That's a distortion of what's out there. Sugar causes insulin to go up, right? High levels of insulin over time damage the receptors. It's a known fact. It's a scientific fact. We can prove this over and over again. Can other things damage those insulin receptors? Yes. Hydrogenated fats, like in those almond flour keto cookies, right? Not hydrogenated, but oxidized fat. Hydrogenated fats, like in the standard crap that people are eating, like, the baked goods that you get in a store, right? Those are loaded with those things. Pesticides, so if you're not eating organic, they can all damage the insulin receptors. But high level of insulin is a very common cause of it. It's the most common cause of it. So I agree that fats can damage the insulin receptors. Fats can cause insulin resistance, but it depends on the type of fats, right? They've looked at studies where people who had high levels of animal fats, saturated animal fats, had higher levels of insulin resistance. Okay, that's good. That's something we can avoid. I'm completely plant-based. I haven't had animal saturated fats in decades, yet I still have a degree of insulin resistance because I have the genetics for it. Because I grew up on Kool-Aid and M&Ms and cookies and cakes and candies and pies and bread, right? So I set the stage for that. And now I just have to be more careful. For me personally, fruit in high quantities without greens will cause my sugars to go up. And when I say high quantities, I mean normal quantities that the average person eats. If I eat a small amount of fruit with a lot of greens with it, I can keep my blood sugar steady. How do I know this? I monitor. And anybody with a history, a family history of diabetes, anybody with a history of having that extra fat around the middle, anybody with a history of that craving for sweets after a meal, and anybody with a history of cancer needs to be careful about sweets. And there's people who say, yeah, it's the fats, don't worry about it. But what about cancer cells having 10 times the number of insulin receptors? When you eat foods that are high in sugar, even if it's fruit, even if it's like, I don't know, molasses or honey or these so-called healthy sweeteners, you're still giving food to the cancer cells because they have more insulin receptors and they gobble it up. Meanwhile, the rest of your body is probably insulin resistant and your good cells are shoving it away. So not a good idea. But there are people who can eat as much fruit as they want and their blood sugars don't budge. And those are people who don't have cancer and who've been taking care of themselves. But you don't want to risk cancer because you think that you have to avoid fat and have, all this fatty stuff or this fatty stuff instead of sugar, or that you say, oh, no, I'm going to avoid fat and I'm going to just eat lots of fruit and bread and pasta. I heard somebody say that the other day. It's okay to eat bread and pasta if you have diabetes. Like, who says? How do I know? It might be true for you. It was somebody who had diabetes. It might be true for them, totally. But it's not true for everybody because we're all unique. You look at us outside, and I look very different from you. But all of our genes, 99.5% are the same. And if it can be that different on the outside, just with that 0.5% of the genes, what about the metabolic processes on the inside? We've got to be able to take that into account. Like, I can't eat high levels of carbs. I've tried it, guys. I've tried it. I tried the 80-10-10 diet, and all I did was crave sugar. All I did was crave sugar and felt like I was on this roller coaster. But some people do really well on it. I do better with a keto-like plant-based diet. Keto-like, I say, it's not keto per se, but I can test my ketones and I'm in mild ketogenic state, which means that I can burn fat. Who wants to be going after new sugar when you have plenty of fat on your body? I can burn fat very comfortably, right? And I try to help people to get into that state where you can bounce back and forth between sugar and fat, sugar and fat. So these are things that need to happen. I'm going to throw in a fourth one because I heard it on a video just last week and it was like, eat every 3 hours. I haven't heard that in years. This was a recent video saying that the trick to weight loss is to eat every 3 hours and eat protein, fat, and carbs. Okay, yeah, that's a good balance. Eat some protein, fat, and carbs together every 3 hours. Great. But what do we do What do we do when insulin is up high in the system all day? Every 3 hours, you're going to constantly have insulin elevated. It doesn't ever come down. We need to space our meals. There's a lot of value to intermittent fasting, different fasting windows for different people. Granted, skinny people need to eat more frequently. But if you're trying to lose weight and you're eating every 3 hours, good luck. You're going to be hungry all day long. Your baseline insulin is never going to be achieved. And you're going to just keep storing fat. So these are myths that I think are hurting people. And there's people in authority or people who've written books and whatnot that are saying these things. And I'm not saying that some of these things don't work for some people. They certainly do, or they wouldn't have come up with them. But usually it's because it worked for me, then I think it's going to work for everybody. For example, I teach a program where I teach people how to get their blood sugars under control. And with that program, we have a 30-day metabolic reset, and you're supposed to check your blood sugars, and anything that raises it above a certain level, you leave out for 30 days to give your insulin receptors a rest and let them heal. And most people, when they do that, we're lowering the carbs. We're getting rid of the grains. We're getting rid of the fruits or lowering the fruits for the 30-day period. And most people, that's what they do, and it works beautifully. And every now and then we get a person or two who doesn't do well with that, needs to have more of the whole grains in them. Usually it's somebody with a fast metabolism. Usually it's somebody who's thin, but they don't do well on the diet that most people do well with. So we have to just take into account what works for you, what works for your patient or client. My favorite way to determine that is by testing glucose. CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, are one of my favorite ways. And I wish we could get a glucose monitor on the arm or belly, wherever you want to wear it, of every person for at least 2 weeks of your life, for maybe a month of your life. So you can actually look at what your foods that you're eating are doing to you. Most of these folks that are doing these programs are not having people test. And there's certain people with certain genetics that really do need to have a very low-fat diet. If you've ever heard of ApoE44, if you've got that genetic variant, you need to be really careful because your body can't process the saturated fats. So it's very, very important. There's another gene called FTO. And when people have that, it has to do with fat mass index, and they don't do well at all on a ketogenic diet. Right? But people with some of the genetics like I have, I don't do well on a high sugar diet or a high grain diet, but I thrive on a diet the way I do it now, with lots and lots of vegetables and olives and coconut and avocados and nuts and seeds. Not to the extent of like a keto diet of 80% fat. I don't do well with that either. But some kind of imbalance, somewhere in the middle in a balance. Goldilocks principle, right? Not too little, not too much, just right, but just right for you. So the genes play a part, and I really think that, more and more doctors and practitioners need to be looking at that in helping people to design the perfect diet for you. I don't believe that everybody should be on a plant-based diet, that everybody should be on a keto diet, that everybody should be on a macro diet or a Whole30 or whatever those diets are. I think that we have to help people determine what the best diet is. I always tell people, they say, what diet should I follow? I say the you diet, the Susie diet, the Mary diet, the Joe diet. You've got to figure it out. And I want to help you to figure that out. We're doing a free webinar series. It's already started, but you can get the first one. There's 3 parts to it. The one that we're having this Wednesday is actually on food, and it's on all the different genetic factors that you might take into account to help you to determine this. And we're also doing a 2-day event, a live online event at the end of July, to be able to pull all this together and help you put this together and figure out your personalized diet plan. So this is Dr. Rita Marie. If you like this video, just go ahead and click on some of the others. There's a lot of other videos on this topic on the channel. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. We usually go live once a week, usually on Mondays, but sometimes it varies. And we're here to support you in getting your health back and in supporting you to help clients to do the same. And if you were conventionally trained, a lot of this functional stuff is new to you. If you were trained in like a health coaching program, a lot of the depth that I go into in sharing is new to you. So stay tuned. I'm here to support you. And until next time, be unstoppable. Thank you. Bye.